Hello and welcome to our All About Research webinar. This is the first of 6 educational presentations that our center will be offering this year. Each month we'll have a virtual meeting on different topics related to Parkinsonism and living well. Our hope is that you'll learn something new and find this information relevant and useful in your day-to-day lives. Today we'll be focusing on research. First, one of our physician researchers, Dr. Etcha Byram, will share about the importance of research, how a trial comes to be, and some developments in our field. Following that, Christina Addington, one of our center's research coordinators, will give you the inside scoop on participating in a research study and share some of our currently recruiting studies. Now let's dive in with Dr. Byram.
All right, you can see my slides. Yeah, good. All right, well, I'm Edja. As Lisa mentioned, I'm a researcher here. I'm very excited / anxious for the talk today. Let's get started. I hope you grab some drinks because it is a very hot day and we don't want you getting dehydrated while listening to the talks. So putting it out there, I'm not gaining any financial benefits from anything I mentioned in this talk. And I did include some pictures from my home country, Turkey, and Star Wars. So please don't complain me to Google for stealing some pictures from them. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about some Parkinson's treatments that we're using nowadays. And then I'm going to walk through the drugs in the pipeline, what to look out for. And I'm going to tell you about representation and research, why I care about it. And I noticed that I have a typo there. Whoops. And then hopefully I'm going to make you leave this talk thinking, why not participate in research? I totally want to participate in research. All right, so let's get right onto it. Parkinson's treatments nowadays. So right now, what we have available for Parkinson's disease is just the symptomatic treatments. What I mean by symptomatic treatments are the treatments that can help address some of your symptoms. It may not completely cure the disease or stop the progression or even slow down the progression, but it can really help with a lot of the symptoms. And it can really improve your quality of life so you can still participate in activities you normally do when you did not have Parkinson's. But it's not just one drug that goes in Parkinson's, right? It's a lot of effort and it's a lot of commitment from the person affected by this disease and everyone around that person. It's the team management, and without the person affected and the relatives in the game, we're not going to get anywhere with managing the disease. So we need the full commitment of the person affected, and then as your doctor, they can provide you some drug treatments, some more referrals to other people that can help you out with the disease, but you are the person in charge of your treatment, and you are the person that has to put in the effort to actually make the treatment work. We are personalizing treatments based on what your symptoms are and what your needs are. And as you probably know by now, every person with Parkinson's has a completely different disease. They may be impacted by different symptoms, and different symptoms may matter in a different way for people affected by this disease. So we take those into account when we're planning your treatments, and we do provide you with a personalized treatment plan, although we're not at the point of doing personalized medicine in Parkinson's disease just yet. Why is this disease so hard to treat? Why is it so frustrating for all of us? Well, it's because there are a lot of mechanisms that go into play to cause the Parkinson's disease as we know right now. All these different mechanisms act out very differently in different people. And a lot of different people don't even have the same factors that go into their disease. We know some risk factors that can increase the likelihood of getting Parkinson's disease, but let me remind you, everyone has a different set of risk factors. And also, having a risk factor does not necessarily guarantee you'll get a disease. So we're not sure. We're not exactly sure how to pin it down just yet. We just know that it's complex. So many mechanisms are into play. So many factors are impacting this disease. And that is why we could not still figure out one good drug to cure the disease. But this many mechanisms also gives us many targets we can go after when we're trying to plan new trials. But the issue is trials take time. We can't just come up with one amazing agent that's going to target a mechanism that we know is impacted in Parkinson's and then put it out to the market and cure the disease. We can't do that. For us to get a drug to the market, we have to go through many steps. First of all, we need to make sure an agent, a drug, is safe. The first rule we have when we graduate from medical school or medical institutes is to not harm. So we want to make sure whatever we offer you, whatever we provide for you, is going to be safe for you to use. So first thing, we got to make sure an agent, a drug, is safe for people affected by these disorders. And then we want to make sure it's efficient, it's actually helpful for you, because why do you want to give you something that's not going to help you at all? And then we want to make sure that those effects are consistent. We want to make sure that majority of people are experiencing those benefits without too many safety concerns. And then we're going to share it with the approval gods like the FDA in the United States. And they're going to decide if the findings are convincing or if not. And they're going to approve or suggest further research. And once they approve, then the production is going to begin. Things are going to hit the market. And right now, that's a long process. For levodopa, the thing we use almost the most in Parkinson's disease, and it can really make a big change for people's lives too. It took more than 60 years for it to hit the market, to be used the way we know it today. Luckily, things have gotten faster. It's not taking 60 years right now, but it still takes around a decade, maybe less, maybe more, for us to actually create a brand new drug, put it to all these tests, do all the studies, and get it out to you in the markets. But don't get discouraged, because it takes a long time and no one wants to wait such a long time to be cured from a disease. There is a lot of effort going into this disorder. Sorry, I had to plug my laptop. So right now we have over 139 active clinical trials. The numbers are actually even more probably, because these are just the trials that were registered into the clinicaltrials.gov. So there may be more than 139. And a good chunk of these clinical trials are targeting symptoms, so not necessarily changing the course of the disease, but trying to help make the symptoms better, so improve the quality of life so you can carry on doing your daily activities as you normally would. But a good chunk of these, almost half of these clinical trials, are targeting disease modification, so modifying how the disease progresses, slowing it down, preventing some advanced stage problems, and hopefully one day stopping it completely, preventing it, and curing this disease. So there is a lot of things on the line. Almost half of them are brand new agents that were never used before. 35% of them are repurposed agents. So we already have a good idea about their safety in different disease groups, but we're not sure how it works in Parkinson's. But, you know, there's hope. We're testing it out. And also there are studies using the drugs we know and use in Parkinson's, but different ways of administering them. And out of these active clinical trials, a large percent of them are still in the early phases. So we're still trying to figure out whether they're safe and whether they show some benefits. Not a lot in the phase 3 where we think there's a benefit and we're trying to prove it in bigger samples. We're not there yet for a lot of these, but there's a lot being researched as we're speaking right now. And this gives hope. There's a lot of things to look out for in the horizon. I'm not going to go over each individual drug here, of course, but I wanted to share it with you to show you that there's a lot being done and there's a lot of different mechanisms being targeted. And the good thing is people are very ambitious to cure this disease. People, pharmaceutical companies, people that work there, clinicians, FDA, everyone is very committed to actually improving the lives of people affected by these diseases. And that is why a lot of work is going into it, a lot of funding is going into it, and a lot of effort is going into it. And we're very hopeful. This is why we do what we do, because we think we can tackle this disease. It may take 1 million trials, 1 million failures, but we're going to get there someday. We're going to get over those trials, we're going to get over those failures, and we're going to be able to provide an agent or multiple agents or combination of agents where we can say, take this, Parkinson's will be gone. But of course, all of these trials can only work if there are participants. We cannot get anywhere without participants coming out to join these research studies. And there can be many reasons why people would want to participate in a research study. You got to remember all the drugs that we use today in the treatment of these disorders were thanks to all the participants back in the day that took part in the clinical trials. If we cannot find participants for a clinical trial, that drug is never going to hit the market. So you may want to help others and you may want to contribute to the knowledge about Parkinson's and to help the future generations to have better access to these drugs. Also, I told you it takes a long time for a drug to hit the market after the research phases. And you may want to gain access before it hits the market. You may want to gain access in the early stages before losing all that precious time of your life. So you can do that through these clinical trials. And also, since we're so worried about the safety, we are going to be like hawks on you when you are in a clinical trial. We're not going to be your clinical team where we actually give you clinical advice, but we're going to be looking out for red flags constantly. We may notice things that you wouldn't have noticed normally because you wouldn't think it's a symptom of anything. We may notice those, but also we may help you out with things that you think is something going on, something wrong, and we may help explain what actually is happening. So we can give you that extra regular and added care and attention when you're in a clinical trial. And people are willing. Majority of the people are happy to help out with clinical trials. They want to participate. But despite the willingness of people, 90% of the clinical trials are not able to enroll people within the targeted time, which means those clinical trials are going to be delayed, which means a drug that is perhaps working great is going to be delayed in hitting the market. And as you're waiting for a drug to hit the market, you may be losing very functional years of your life. Right now, only 1 out of every 3 multi-center trials are able to achieve their recruitment goals. So a lot of research right now has focused on why can't we get people to join the trials? We know they're willing, we know they want to be part of the trials. What are the barriers? And this research has shown that there can be a lot of barriers for participation in different stages when we're trying to recruit people, when we're trying to screen, enroll people in a trial, and also when we're trying to keep people in the trial. You may not have access to academic centers. You're not hearing about the clinical trials. You may not fit the eligibility criteria, which is sometimes pretty strict and not a good representation of the real life conditions. You may be working, or a clinical trial may require you to come out with a caregiver, and your caregiver or your care partner will be working, and you may not be able to get time off from work for all the trial commitments you have to do. Maybe you don't live close to where the center is and transportation is a trouble for you. But we can address some barriers for you, but we're not going to be able to address those unless you tell us. So just be aware that a lot of research went into it. We are aware of these barriers, and we are aware that these barriers are going to differ from person to person. So we try our best not to make any assumptions of what your barriers might be, but you got to let us know if you have any barriers so we can help you out with those. And why do we care about representation and research? You know, we have the willing people participating in clinical trials, even though we're not hitting the numbers we want yet. But the problem is, majority of the clinical trial participants are people that are educated more, that have more access, so they hear more about the opportunities, and they identify as whites. And a lot of Parkinson's trials, we also get more males than females. So why does race and ethnicity matter when it comes to representation? It's not biological differences. We don't expect someone identifying as white and someone identifying as Hispanic living in the same community to have a complete different genetic profile. These are social constructs. We expect inequities instead of the biological differences. And the problem is those inequities are going to impact how you experience these diseases. And they're going to impact if you're actually going to qualify for a trial or not. For instance, people identifying as African American that have Parkinson's disease apparently have more accompanying diseases alongside their Parkinson's, which may make them more ineligible for a lot of the clinical trials. But now that we're getting more and more aware of this, we can actually impact the clinical trial eligibility criteria to be inclusive of people that have these accompanying diseases that we're going to see in real life anyways. What about sex, gender? So sex is the biological term, female, male, whereas gender is the social construct. You don't necessarily have to identify with the sex you were assigned at birth. And we know that differences occur across sexes and genders when it comes to Parkinson's disease. This is due to both biological and also inequities that come with that social construct. And that is kind of why we see this different Parkinson's symptoms, because of both the genetic, both the biological impact, and also the environmental disparities impact. And that impacts the participation of people in clinical trials. And if we're testing an agent in a very specific community and we're finding that effect, for instance, we have no idea if that is going to be the same effect in other communities. So we need all different communities with Parkinson's to get the proper representation so we can have an applicable, a generalizable finding for the clinical trials and be more efficient in the way we manage this disease. Moving along from sex and gender, we have no idea about people identifying as sexual and gender minorities that have Parkinson's disease. We know that they experience discrimination more. Even when they're at their doctor's office, they're experiencing discrimination more than people that identify as male, female, woman, man, same sex as their gender. And I think it's horrifying. A doctor's office should be the last place you experience discrimination. And if you are experiencing discrimination, even when you're trying to receive healthcare, I don't know how you would make it to a research study. So I just want you all to hear, to know. We are aware of these. We know a lot of mechanisms that come into play in Parkinson's can be targeted by different agents. And we are aware that generalizability of those findings matter a lot. And we care about representation and giving the platform to all people that can be affected by Parkinson's. And I just listed sex, gender, ethno-racial groups here, but the list of underrepresented groups in research can go on and on. Just remember, we're here for you, we're aware, and we want to make life better for all of you. We are aware that one size does not fit all when it comes to the clinical care and also the research participation for people affected by these diseases. So just remember, we have a pretty diverse team here at UCSD. We are aware of these, and we want to help you out and get you participating in clinical trials. So please reach out. You may have barriers for participation. We may have solutions for you, but we can't fix those for you if you don't let us know. Let us know. If you have any problems, any concerns, let us know and leave it up to us to try to fix those. And remember, the clinical trials are only going to be making it out into the market if there are participants that can show that there is an effect, it's safe. And the burden falls not just on us, but on you too, because we know that people may be willing to participate in research, but they're not hearing about research studies. And we are trying to spread the words, do outreach as much as we can, but we may not have the communities that you have. So it may fall on you a little bit to share with your community too, to increase the education around there too, to let them know, hey, I heard about this trial. Hey, I heard the UCSD or elsewhere, they're recruiting people for trials. People may be interested. So have them reach out to us too. Who knows? We may have something for them as well. And with that, thank you so much for listening. I'll pass it on to the next presenter, our coordinator, Christina. I think we have the webinar format, but I think it would have been a very better format if we had a dialogue for this topic, because I think it's not just me talking at you, but your opinion, your input about this topic is what matters the most, because we're trying to represent, we're trying to get your voice heard, and you have a voice in this. So please put it in the Q&A if you have any comments. You don't have to have questions, but if you even have comments, please put it in there. And I hope you reach out to us to find out a study you may be interested in, and even to chat with us about what we're doing to help proceed the clinical trials in Parkinson's and Parkinsonian disorders. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was awesome. Christina, are you ready to roll?
Yes, I'm ready. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. Give me just a second. And then just if you could let me know if you can see it, okay? Okay, can you guys see that okay, Lisa?
Yes.
Okay, all right. All right, my name is Christina Addington, and I am one of the research coordinators here at the Parkinson and Other Movement Disorders Center here at UCSD. So the first topic we're going to cover is how research happens. Well, we have our team, and as Ajay just showed, we have quite a team now. This picture is when we were much smaller. Our research team consists of physicians, a nurse practitioner, a research manager, clinical research coordinators, research assistants, and a regulatory coordinator. You can find enrolling studies on our website. We do have trials for healthy volunteers, which I'll list at the end, when we conduct both observational studies and clinical trials. And your primary contact will be your research coordinator, whoever is in charge of the trial. And I'd just like to note that we're going to use the terms study and trial interchangeably throughout this presentation, and we will define some of the common terms on the next few slides. So here are types of studies. Not all types of studies test medications. In observational studies, we focus on collecting data or observing, and no experimental medication is given. Observational studies help us learn more about a disease or condition so that we may develop hypotheses about potential causes and risk factors that can then be put to test in a clinical trial. Observational studies can find associations between things, but can't prove that one thing causes another. So correlation does not equal causation. Observational studies are just as important as clinical trials to the advancement of scientific knowledge. So in the left-hand column here, we've listed a few types of observational studies. I'll go very briefly into them because it will just depend on what study interests you. You know, some participants want something that's only medication or some sort of drug trial, and some prefer just to do observational studies. In the left-hand column, we have longitudinal study. This follows participants over a specified period of time. These studies are generally observational, but they could be experimental. A cross-sectional study captures data of many people at a particular moment in time. A case study is a detailed description of one or more cases of a condition in patients. A case control study compares a group of people with a condition to those without it. And a cohort study involves observing a large group of people over time. So now in the right column, we've listed phases of clinical trials. A clinical trial is also called an interventional study. So we will also use these terms interchangeably throughout the presentation. In clinical trials, we test new ways to prevent, detect, or treat a disease. Treatments could be new medications, they could be new surgical procedures, new devices, or new ways to use existing treatments. A phase 1 study, this is going to be first time in humans. This usually involves less than 100 people. The purpose is to find out whether a new treatment or intervention is safe, well tolerated, and to find the appropriate doses. In a phase 2 trial, this usually involves about 100 to 300 people. And here we're starting to focus more on effectiveness, but we continue to study safety. Participants receiving the new intervention could be compared to those receiving a different treatment or placebo. In a phase 3 trial, this could involve several hundred to thousands of people. As we saw with the vaccine trials, it was 30,000 or more people. At this stage, we're gathering information about safety and to prove whether the intervention works or its effectiveness. This stage is also to determine if the benefits outweigh the risks. If the results are positive, they're submitted to the FDA for approval to market. And lastly here, we have the phase 4 study. This involves thousands of people. These are post-marketing studies, so after FDA approval, and the treatment is monitored in large, diverse populations to get the full view of its safety and effectiveness, and also over time, because after you've been taking a medication maybe for 20 years, you know, there might be side effects that take longer to come about. So on this next slide, we have some key points. A clinical trial is a research study involving human volunteers to evaluate the effectiveness and safety of the intervention being studied. The intervention may be a medication, a device, or procedure. Researchers may test new ways to prevent or treat a disease. Sometimes clinical trials involve new diagnostic measures. And participants are randomly assigned to a study arm, either placebo or the active treatment. And we'll get a little into this. So one thing I am usually asked are what these words mean, because I realize we're throwing a lot of words out there that you may have never heard. Maybe you've heard of some of them, maybe placebo, maybe single blind. And so I'm going to define some of these words. And since this is recorded, you can go back to it and kind of review it. This is also on some of the websites I'm going to list at the bottom. Some of the websites like clinicaltrials.gov and the Michael J. Fox Foundation have a glossary where you can look up what some of these terms mean. So single blind studies, this is where only one group knows which participants are getting active drug or placebo. In a double blind study, the researchers nor the participants know who is getting the study intervention or who is getting placebo. So this is pretty common for us. In an open label, participants will be getting active drug, but the participants and researchers may still be blinded to the dose. And blinding is important to prevent bias in the study data. Unblinding or revealing the intervention assignment is only done in emergency situations or after the study. So your study coordinator will not be able to just tell you what you have. It's considered breaking the blind is what we call it. And it's an issue with the study data after that point. And so it's only done for emergency cases. Placebo, you may have heard this called a sugar pill. This is a substance that's made to look like the intervention being studied. So it's usually just something inert. A multi-center trial is a trial conducted at multiple research facilities. These research centers could be around the world, and for many of our trials, they are. An extension trial may also be called a long-term extension or an open label extension. These extension trials allow participants to continue to receive the study therapy once they have completed the original study. A protocol is a detailed document that explains why the trial is taking place, the goals or endpoints, who is eligible, how long the trial will last, and how to conduct the trial. And the protocol is really a document that is for the research team. This is not something the patient has. This is protected information, but we're given a very thorough document of everything to do. The sponsor, you'll hear that and you'll see that in a consent form. That is the organization or person who funds and manages the study. So allocation ratio, this is a little more complicated, and this will be in a consent. So I'm going to just give a couple more sentences about that. The allocation ratio, this is how study participants are randomized and divided into the study arms. So if your consent form said a 1-to-1 allocation ratio, that means there's a 50% chance of receiving placebo and a 50% chance of receiving study treatment. Now, if your consent said a 1-to-1-to-1 allocation ratio, that means the chances are all 33%. So in clinical trials, we generally see a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio when there are 2 doses of study drug, a high dose and a low dose, being compared to placebo. So some more common terminology. IRB, this is the Institutional Review Board. This is comprised of an independent committee of scientists, doctors, and one non-scientific person tasked with protecting each participant's rights, privacy, and welfare. The IRB is involved throughout the trial. The informed consent form, or sometimes you'll hear us say ICF, or we'll write it as ICF. This is the document that details all aspects of the study for participants. This document will help potential study participants make an informed decision before participating in the study. And I always recommend patients keep it in a very secure place because it has all that information to refer back to, but it also has a 24-hour contact number, it has an address, it has a lot of information that you'll need throughout the trial. So a healthy volunteer may be a participant in a trial to test a new intervention, or they may be a control to compare with the affected target population. The principal investigator is the lead researcher in charge of the study. The inclusion-exclusion criteria is a list of eligibility criteria used to find the right fit for the study. So when a potential participant meets one of the exclusion criteria or does not meet one of the inclusion criteria, they are considered ineligible for the trial and screen fail. But being screen failed from one trial does not mean you wouldn't qualify for another. When a participant qualifies for a trial, they are then eligible to be randomized. Randomization is the point at which a research participant is randomly assigned to either placebo or the study intervention. This is also sometimes called baseline or day 0, and future visit dates are calculated out from this day. An adverse event is any unfavorable symptom or untoward medical occurrence after the ICF is signed. You want to report all new signs and symptoms to your study coordinator and study doctor. You'd also want to report any medications taken for that adverse event, even if it's just an ibuprofen. So PK stands for pharmacokinetic. A PK sample measures the concentration of study drug in the participant's blood at specific time points. So now what to expect? So what should you expect in a study? Participation is always voluntary. We just always want to remind you of that. You want to ask the researcher to provide you with the consent form or the ICF prior to your first appointment, so you can really have time to read it, review it with your partner, with your family, or with your primary care provider. You want to prepare questions to pose to the researchers. The informed consent form will provide you with all the information about the study, and informed consent is documented before you enroll. We call this first visit for the study the screening visit, and this is when the informed consent form is signed. Excuse me. The screening visit will generally be quite extensive because the study team needs to collect data in order to determine if you could be a good candidate for the trial. This visit is somewhat like your first time seeing a new doctor. The researchers will gather your medical history, confirm your diagnosis, and perform tests to make sure you're healthy. A screening visit is necessary to confirm eligibility, and a doctor referral does not mean that you would qualify for a trial. So even if it is one of our physicians in our movement disorders clinic, and they refer you for the trial, what they're doing is saying you might fit for this trial, but you'd actually have to complete the screening visit to know for sure if you do qualify for the trial. The baseline visit would be the point when you enter the trial, and this may also be called randomization. For some studies, the screening visit and the baseline visit can occur on the same day. It is at the baseline visit that participants are enrolled into the study after it's verified thoroughly that they meet eligibility criteria. Upon screening for a study, you're going to be designated a participant ID number. And the reason I mention this is because of privacy. The number is not related to any information that would identify you in any way. All data collected from you will be labeled with this number and not your name. No identifiable personal information would be used if study data is published or presented at a scientific meeting. The study ICF will have a section of the consent form that will go into detail about privacy. So during the trial, it is imperative to follow study guidelines. And here are just a few more things. Privacy protections also apply in research. I get this question often. You want to continue your usual medical care with your primary care provider, even if your neurologist is the same person you're seeing in the study. You still want to see your neurologist in the movement disorders clinic. You should not be forced or coerced into participating. You can withdraw at any time and always answer questions honestly. So common questions to ask. So study frequently asked questions. Here are some questions that I get quite often. What will be expected of me? How long is each study visit? How frequent are the study visits? What if I want to take a vacation during the study? And yes, it's definitely possible. We try our hardest to work around vacations. How flexible is the visit schedule? When will I know if I was on a placebo? Will I have access to test results? What are the potential risks and benefits? Are visits in person or through telemedicine? What happens in a visit? How long will my participation last? Can I take other medications while in the study? Can I be in 2 studies at once? And will I be reimbursed for expenses? And the answers to these questions are different for every study. Many of these questions may be answered in the ICF, but there are certain ones I know are not in the ICF, such as usually the visit window. That's not. So your coordinator would be able to answer that and give you that projection. It may help to ask for a visit calculator to project out future visits, or ask what the visit window is to help plan ahead. A visit window is the allowed range of dates for a visit to occur. And for some studies, it might just be a 3-day range. For some studies, it may be 7 days. And some observational trials, it's much longer. But generally, it's about 3 to 5 days. You'll always want to talk to your coordinator when experiencing any changes to your health and before changing any medications or taking new medications. And that includes over-the-counter medications or supplements. You want to make sure that anything you're taking will not interfere with the study treatment. And it may be possible to participate in 2 studies at once, but you always want to verify with the study doctors and coordinators first. So this would be possibly you could be in an observational trial while you're in another trial if the observational trial is not interventional in any way. So how can you get involved? Here are some websites. I also made this this little code that you can point your camera at from your phone and it will open up our website, I believe. But if not, here are some websites that are listed so that you can have a good resource for trials, for answers, for they also have glossary of terms. They're very helpful. So when searching for a clinical trial, when I get phone calls about people who want to be in clinical trials, this is probably the best resource I use, just because all clinical trials must be listed on this site. It's a database of observational studies and clinical trials. There's general information. I believe it has frequently asked questions and a glossary of common terms. Words that are marked with that little I in a circle, those, if you just hover over those, it'll provide you with an explanation or a definition when you click it. The more criteria you enter, the more narrowed down the results will be. Some studies have funds to pay for flights or hotels, so you don't necessarily have to limit yourself to just the city you live in. You can always have it very broad if you're willing to travel and reach out to the contact for the study and ask them if there are funds available for travel. Study results will also be posted on this website when available. So here is an example of searching for a clinical trial. I put in one of ours. In the results, you'll be able to see all the sites that are conducting the study. So if I clicked on it, it shows locations and show 10 more locations. But if you click on it, it'll show all the locations. So you can see if there's one near you or if there's one you prefer. Sometimes we have participants who prefer to be seen by a very specific doctor, and so they want to go to a specific site for that reason. You can narrow down results using the search column to the left if you got too many. In this case, we only got one result. And why participate in a study? I know this was already covered, so I'm not going to take too much time covering that. I just wanted to give some feedback that I've heard from participants. The things they've told me is they find it empowering. They find it a meaningful contribution. They feel like they're making a difference. They're taking control of their illness, fighting back and changing the course of the disease and changing lives. So our current studies, as of July 2023, the following studies are open for recruitment. Here first, we have disease-modifying interventional trials. And these ones are for MSA and for Parkinson's disease with the GBA gene. And the therapeutic goal of the treatments used here is to slow disease progression. And we also have these therapeutic trials for symptoms. So these are symptomatic, such as an example, Cinemet would be for symptoms for Parkinson's disease. So these therapeutic trials for symptoms do not slow progression, but they will help potentially with symptoms. So Rewind LB for dementia with Lewy bodies would target cognitive symptoms, and Cypress for MSA targets orthostatic hypotension symptoms. So observational trials that we have quite a few right now. Let me see, we have the following trials for movement disorders and for healthy volunteers. If you are interested in any of these, if you go to our website, it will, you can click on which indication you're looking for and it'll provide you contact information, more information about each of these trials. There's also this PPMI trial that we work with Janelle on. We kind of assist in helping her recruit because we're both seeing movement disorder patients. So here she is also looking for control volunteers and healthy volunteers. So this is one of those trials that we could potentially have, caregivers of our patients with movement disorders participate in. And her contact information is here. This may not be on our website yet with her contact information, just because she is a bit newer. So hopefully we can get her contact information updated on our website if it's not there. And here's another trial that we are recruiting quite a few people for. It's a very simple 1 or 2 visit trial. It's mostly questionnaires. This one should be on our website, and the coordinator for this trial is Alonzo. And you can find us at our website. And any questions you have, please just enter into the Q&A chat and we'll be happy to answer them. And thank you so much for your time.
That will conclude our recording of the All About Research webinar. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for future recordings or look below for registration info to attend live. See you next time.